Hey everyone, it's time for a new edition of the Vegas Nation Mailbag, where we bring you up to date on all things Raiders who will play here in Las Vegas in 2020. I'm your host, Heidi Fang, and joining me today is our sports columnist, Ed Graney, here at the Review Journal. Ed, how you doing today?
Kid, how are you?
Doing all right.
Doing okay?
I'm doing great.
All right, let's get to it.
Yeah, ready to get this rolling. Got so much to talk about here.
No, will we mention Antonio Brown at all?
Oh, I think we'll get to
Maybe.
him. We're going to talk about some liquid hot lava that ran over his feet. And
Yeah.
well, actually, it was quite the reverse. But we're going to get into all of that. And, of course, we're going to talk about the Week 2 game coming up here in Arizona. The Raiders taking on the Cardinals and Kyler Murray. And we're going to get into that saga. And first of all, though, we got to talk about this 14-3 win that the Raiders had in the first week of the preseason. And over the NFC Championship Rams, the defending Championship Rams. So, Ed, what stood out to you in that win?
Yeah, any win's a good win for the Raiders after 4-12 last year. But three things really quick. I think the defense played as well. You have to preface all these comments where it's preseason. A lot of the starters and stars aren't playing, so we preface that all with this. But I thought the defense held the Rams 190 total yards, 54 rushing yards, 3 of 14 on third down. I thought was great. I thought that was a really good job by some of the young defensive players they have. Also, something to look in the next several weeks is the backup quarterback competition between Mike Glennon and Nathan Peterman. Now, Glennon, he was 9 of 12 in the first quarter and played really, really well in the first quarter. 9 of 11, 93 yards. But then he threw 2 bad picks, and it kind of opened the door for Nathan Peterman to come in and rip off a 50-yard run and get then a touchdown pass to Keelan Doss, who's kind of becoming a Hard Knocks story there where people are rooting for him. So I thought Peterman might have made some strides there in the backup role. And then I think we'll all agree, Antonio Brown obviously didn't play. This team, Heidi, has some wide receiver depth. You saw from a kid like J.J. Nelson, 2 catches for 43 yards to over 20 yards per catch. We talked about Keelan Doss, went home, Alameda kid catching the touchdown. This team does have some wide receiver depth. So for a preseason game where not a lot of the guys you know about played, I thought the Raiders and some of their young kids handled themselves well. Well,
in this coming game here in Week 2, we're going to probably get a look at Derek Carr in the offense. And I'm also really curious to see Kyler Murray over in the other side with Arizona play. But with Derek Carr, how long do you anticipate him probably staying in the game?
Maybe a series. Maybe 2 series. I wouldn't play him more than 2 series. I mean, if he comes in and they go to a touchdown the first series, I tell him to put on a baseball cap and get off the field. I mean, we're talking about the backup situation between Glennon and Peterman. This is not, any kind of scientific fact, or we're not breaking news here. Derek Carr has to remain healthy if this team is going to be competitive and win games. So I would let him play because he's got to get some kind of preseason work. And if he's good in the first series, I would say that's it. They might play him a little longer, but I wouldn't if he's good in the first series.
And as we mentioned earlier, if you've been reading our Review Journal coverage, of course, we've been talking about all things Antonio Brown, the helmet gate, the saga, what's happened with his feet in this chirotherapy incident. Ed, you wrote a column, and you said that this may not be the end of the antics. Why do you believe that?
Just because, I agree, he's arguably, when healthy, the best receiver in the league. He's also one of the biggest divas, and I just don't think it stops here. I'm not sure the Raiders care about that part because, I'm sure they don't like the distractions of the feed, obviously, the helmet gate and all that. The Raiders care about on Monday night, September 9th, when the Broncos are in town in Oakland, that guy's on the field and going for 10 and 110 and a couple touchdowns. And that's kind of their dream and what they want from him on a consistent basis and to be the best receiver. So all this other stuff is kind of nonsense that us in the media have a fun time with and can report on. But when it comes to John Gruden and Mike Mayock, they want this guy to be healthy and playing. But again, the drama's not going to stop. What did we find out in the last 24 hours? Now there is a somewhat famous sports chef in Florida that back in the Pro Bowl had cooked a lot of food supposedly for Antonio and many of his guests, over 50 guests in the Pro Bowl, and said Antonio still owes him near $40,000 for that bill, that he had to pay his own workers because Antonio stiffed him on the bill. We'll see if that's true. We'll see how it plays out. But once again, a lot of things in Florida in terms of, kind of issues he's gotten into off the field. And I just don't think the drama stops. But I'm not sure the Raiders care as long as he produces on the field. I don't think that, if he produces and it doesn't get into breaking laws and such things like that, then I think they'll deal with this stuff and they'll always support him and be behind him and hope that the guy comes through and he's as good as he's been in the past because he's a 7-time Pro Bowler and he's a terrific player.
Again, we are live right now on Facebook and on YouTube, and we would look forward to anybody sending us your comments, letting us know what you think. Right now we have one from Logan Moore who says, Washington looked good and is on the bubble. What did you think about his performance? He did score a touchdown in the game when Glennon was in.
Yeah, well, there's we're going to talk about Jacobs in a while, but yeah, there's in terms of the next 2 or 3 spots, I think it's open. I agree with the gentleman making the question or the point about Washington. These are open spots now. Look, this is a running game that last year I think averaged only 101 yards a game, and the number 1 guy from last year is now retired. So if I'm on the depth chart at that position, I'm trying to make any kind of impact I can. And while I think that Josh Jacobs is going to be the starter and Doug Martin's there to support him, they're going to need more people specifically for special teams as well. So I think that's a really good point. And he's a bubble guy probably, but he keeps doing what he did in the first game, and there's a much better chance he makes the team.
Well, let's get into week 2 again. We talked a little bit about how long Derek Carr might stay in the game, but you mentioned Josh Jacobs there. What rookies do you foresee playing in this game?
I think they're all going to play. I think the starters are going to play, and Coach Gruden said that this week. I think everyone gets in tonight for different roles and differing lengths. Maybe some get a half, a quarter, Derek Carr maybe a series. But I think when you get into week 2, you get them time. Week 3, week 4, none of them will play if they have any chance of being starters or starting team. So in 2 and 3 is really when you kind of look at guys who are obviously established or even rookies will start and play a lot. I'm really looking. I like Hunter Renfrow a lot. Yeah. We're going back to the receivers again with Hunter Renfrow. I think there's a lot of guys that you will see tonight and Thursday night that can have an impact on this team. One thing we haven't talked about yet is they have a new punter. That's going to be rookie A.J. Cole, the undrafted kid out of North Carolina State. He has already unseated Johnny Townsend. I was a little surprised only because with the punting, he made a real impact in rookie camp. They signed him into the contract. And Johnny Townsend had an up-and-down field year last year, like much of their special teams, Heidi.
Right.
But I thought they'd go through at least 2 or 3 games in camp. I thought because why not? Because what do you have to lose? And he punted well. A.J. Cole punted well last week. I think he averaged about 44 yards. In college, he was very good down inside the 20, which in the NFL is enormous. But I mean, good for A.J. Cole. I was a little surprised. I don't know about you. I thought they'd go 2 or 3 games in because it's a punter, so who cares? Just let each have a game and see how it shakes out.
I definitely thought we would see more of him. I thought that we would get the chance to, like you said, have a full-out competition. You don't have to necessarily make that cut right now, so why not get the most out of both guys, see really in a full evaluative sense what they're capable of. And, I just thought it was a little early as well.
I do think Johnny Townsend, if I'm not mistaken, has already been claimed off waivers by the New York Giants, so hopefully he'll find a home there.
I don't doubt it, yeah. So we did say that we were also going to talk about who we think is going to make the top 5 as far as players to watch with the Raiders. Now, these might not be the exact 5 that you were thinking about, but these are guys that we think are going to play a critical role in making this team a winning one and have a winning season in this coming football year. So, what do you think, first of all, about Josh Jacobs on that list?
Well, the reason we put him on the list is very obvious. You don't have to have the best running game in the league to win games, but you better have a running game. He's a rookie out of Alabama. Again, this is a running game that averaged 4.2 yards a carry last year, only right over 101 yards, 9 rushing touchdowns. It was not great. I think it was ranked 18th to 20th in the league. This guy has to perform. So we put him number 1 on the list because is he the most important player in the team? No, I still think Carr is. But, and as well as much as they've added receivers and depth around Carr in that sense, we'll see how Waller handles the tight end spot. But, Josh Jacobs has to perform. He has to be good. I'm not saying he has to be an all-pro, but he better be good. So I think he's really, really important for them to win games this year. You have to have at least a threat of it. I mean, if you don't have a threat of it, then they're just going to pin the ears back, and I don't care how good your offensive line is, you're not going to do very much. So I think Josh Jacobs is really important to their overall success.
Yeah, I think last year, once Marshawn Lynch went out of the game, he was hurt, and there was a big struggle there, and they were mixing up a lot of different guys, trying to find that guy who was going to be that every down type of workhorse. Do you think that we'll see that out of Josh Jacobs just because, I mean, what he did have in Alabama, he wasn't necessarily, he didn't have a lot of carries there. He wasn't seen as much like that.
He could essentially get more work here, ironically so. But, I'll go with what Coach Gruden said when we asked him at the start of camp. We'll see how he can eat. I mean, there's practice, and then there's getting in an NFL game and seeing the speed and getting your bell rung a couple times at that level, and then you see how many times he gets up and how good he is after he gets up. It's, the first carry's fine. It's usually the 10th carry. Do you still have it? So we'll see. I mean, they love him in camp. I think he's the starter. But he hasn't done anything yet. So we'll have to see how he reacts when the lights go on. And good kid, great backstory. You root for a kid like that, but we'll have to see. He hasn't done anything yet.
All right, number 2 on the list, Antonio Brown. Of course, number 84. We're expecting big things. They've revamped this wide receiver core, Ed. What do we think, Antonio Brown? What kind of season is he going to have here?
Well, he has to have a good one. And all the nonsense aside, the diva stuff aside, the helmet, the feet, the chef, and all of this, he has to produce at the level of $30 million guaranteed, $50 million over 3 years. They traded for him. They gave up, I believe, a 3 and a 5. He has to produce. He's the best receiver in football when healthy and ready to go and focused and determined. Now he has to go prove it. They really need a big year out of him. And if they get a great year out of him, my gosh, the other guy, Terrell Williams on the other side, could have a really good year. I actually think that's one of the most least talked about but most underrated moves they made on the other side.
Completely agree.
So, no, Antonio Brown has to be Antonio Brown. You don't make that kind of commitment and then not have him perform. And that's why we put him on this list. He has to be really, really good and give them threats that they have not had in the last few years with Carr.
And keeping Carr upright is important, so let's move on to the next guy, Trent Brown. Huge, huge tackle.
It's a large individual.
Very large. I had a photo, and I don't know if this one is actually in here, with him next to Jalen Richard. And man, like Jalen said, all I see is his body in front of me. Yeah. Yes. Pretty much. It is. I am 5 feet tall. Shaq was 7'4", so it's a big difference in height. So what are we expecting out of Trent Brown?
Again, I mean, it's all relative based on the market, and you get what you can get. But essentially, while I don't think he's the best offensive lineman in football, he's now he's the highest paid offensive lineman. So play like it. Gabe Jackson is out, we know. For at least probably half the season. Richie Incognito is gone for 2 games. They gave up, I believe, 52 sacks last year. This guy has to play like the highest paid guy. I mean, seems like he's ready, has a ring, a very confident guy. When you win a ring and you're in New England and you play with Brady, you just have a confidence about you. You expect to win. They need that in that locker room. They need guys with rings in those locker rooms to walk in and say, this is how it's done. I've been to the top. But he has to protect Carr. I mean, like I said, Gabe Jackson is a huge loss, I think. They already knew about Incognito, so while you don't want to miss him for 2 games, they've known that for a really long time. So that's, they can plan for that. I don't know, obviously they weren't planning for Gabe Jackson. So Trent Brown is huge in cutting down on sacks and protecting Carr and allowing Carr the time to find Antonio Brown and to find others down the field.
All right, Arden Key, on the flip side, the Raiders need to generate some pass rush. They need to get on the other, against these quarterbacks, make some big plays. They didn't have that last year. No. So Arden Key, what do we think about him?
Well, look, here's the deal. They had, it was 13 sacks last year as a team.
Yeah.
The league had 11 players with at least 13.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know. They couldn't get to the quarterback. They couldn't rush the quarterback. They want this guy now in his second year as a rush end specialist. He had a sack in the first game against the Rams. Okay, I know it's preseason. I don't know. He's probably going against 2s in a lot of instances. But Arden Key has to develop himself as a specialist getting to the quarterback. He's got to go get sacks. Whatever that means, I don't know what that means. He's got to get hurried. A lot of times you don't get the sack, but if you hurry the guy enough and do a mistake, you're fine. I mean, you got to get pressured. They've got to get some kind of pass rush going. I think Arden Key in his second year appears bigger, stronger, more confident, and he's got to go be a guy now. If they're going to make him a third down specialist, you've got to pin the ears back and go. And they had look at the end of the year, if they have 13 sacks again, it's not good. They have got to pressure the quarterback in this league better than they did last year.
100% agree with that. And to bring it in on the inside there, we got Vontaze Burfict, linebacker. He's on a 1-year contract, Ed, so how much of an impact do we expect to see from him right away?
Well, you hope so as your middle linebacker. Look, this is a defense that was last in total defense, last in scoring defense, 19th in pass defense, and 30th in run defense. They couldn't defend you and I. On most days, we're not very swift. So, they have to be better defensively. And a guy in the middle who, he's had his issues, obviously. He's had his suspensions. He's known as a dirty player. All of that. We all know this about him. But this guy has to perform in the middle of the field. And he has to lead that defense that last year, statistically at least, was one of the worst in the leagues on most metrics. Like I said, last scoring, last total, 30th run, 19th against the pass, which is amazing given they could never get to the quarterback. So Vontaze Burfict has to come in, playing for defensive coordinator Paul Gunther. He knows very well. He'll know the system. But again, it's sounding like a broken record, but these 5 guys have to perform at their specific spots for 4-12 to, have a chance at what?
9-7?
9-7, 8-8.
Yeah.
I mean,
I was going to give him a
we're probably going high end. We're probably going high end on 9. But I think the goal in a lot of people's minds, not Gruden because he wants to be 16-0, is 4 last year. You've got to improve extensively this year, and then you have to come into Vegas in 2020 as a team ready and prepared to contend for the AFC West title. Yeah. I think that's a trajectory, if everyone remains healthy and improves at a good rate, that you can have happen with this team.
All right, so there you have it. We are the Vegas Nation Mailbag, and we will be here all season for you. So make sure to check us out on the Vegas Nation app, on vegasnation.com. We'll be around as the preseason continues moving forward, and for the Denver Broncos on Monday Night Football. So Ed, for Ed
Heidi.
Graney, I'm Heidi Fang. Thank you for watching.